We cannot securely attach to ourselves if we are constantly oriented outward. Secure attachment to self requires self-referencing. It requires knowing that when something comes up emotionally, we can turn toward ourselves instead of abandoning ourselves or outsourcing our safety by trying to feel safe through other people, places, and things. When that happens, emotions stop being emergencies. They become messages, not messes.
Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. If you're tired of feeling fragmented and overwhelmed, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of wholeness, authenticity, and healthy boundaries. I'm a woman in recovery who is also a boundaries coach and speaker. I share raw and honest insights from my own journey and the principles of 12-Step Recovery. Discover how to set boundaries without guilt or shame, overcome people-pleasing tendencies, manage your emotions effectively, cultivate a stronger sense of self, and build healthier relationships. My approach is raw, honest, and sometimes a little bit, a lot sweary. I'm an avid beachcomber and a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially Christmas movies. I wear fingerless gloves almost all year round because my hands are always cold. And I love taking pictures of license plates with my initials BN on them. I don't speak for or endorse any particular 12-step program of recovery. Though I'm a huge fan of 12-step recovery and a member of two such fellowships, I cannot speak for them. If you're ready for real talk and practical tools for transformation, keep listening.
This is episode 337. How internal safety changes your emotional world. I've been talking a lot lately about internal safety. Today, I want to talk about what actually changes emotionally when that safety starts coming from inside of you instead of outside of you. Because here's the thing. I wasn't really taught anything about emotions. I didn't grow up in an environment where feelings were explained, explored, or even really welcomed. I had to figure emotions out on my own, especially as a young child. And when you're left to figure something out on your own, you do the best you can with what you have. So of course it makes sense that I didn't really understand what emotions were or what they meant. What I came to believe was that my emotions were verdicts about other people. If I was angry, it meant someone was bad. If I was sad, it meant something was wrong with the relationship. If I felt anxious, it meant something bad was about to happen. So emotions weren't information, they were evidence. They were proof that something outside of me was wrong, dangerous, or unacceptable. And that way of understanding emotions kept me completely externally focused. I was constantly scanning other people, places, things, situations, outcomes, trying to figure out what needed to change so that I could feel okay again. A really clear example of this from my own life is resentment. Before I got into recovery and before I did any real feelings work, if I was annoyed or resentful towards someone, I genuinely believed that meant this person is a dick. That was the meaning I assigned to it. I didn't think, oh, this is telling me something about me. I thought, this is telling me who they are. But what I've learned through recovery, boundaries work, and a lot of emotional education is this. When you live a boundaries-based life, emotions are internal signals, not external diagnoses. They point to what we need. When I say emotions point to what we need, I want to slow that down for a minute because for a lot of people that sounds nice in theory, but confusing in practice. One of the first ways I teach people to keep the focus on themselves is by asking a very simple question. What do I want or need in this situation? Now, I want to be really honest about this. That question was not even in the realm of possibility for me before I got into recovery. It truly never occurred to me to ask myself what I wanted or needed. My attention was always on what other people wanted, what they needed, what would keep the peace, what would make things okay. So if you start asking yourself that question and don't know the answer, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you've been people pleasing. You've been a chameleon, a peacekeeper, overgiver, overly responsible. So of course you don't know what you need. That muscle hasn't been used yet. So here's what happens. You ask yourself, what do I need? And nothing comes up, or you draw a blank, or your mind jumps immediately to someone else. And then you ask again, and you keep asking again and again. And eventually something starts to surface. It might be quiet. It might feel selfish. It might feel uncomfortable. But you start to realize, oh, this is what I want. This is what I need in this situation. Now, here's the next phase that almost everyone goes through. You start to discern what you want and need, but then you don't give it to yourself. Why? Because guilt shows up, shame shows up, because old beliefs kick in about being a bad person or being too much or letting people down. So you keep asking anyway, and over time, something shifts. You start asking yourself what you need, and you start hearing the answer. And eventually, you begin to give it to yourself. That is how self-trust is built. That's how internal safety is built. Not all at once, not perfectly, but through repetition. You just keep asking. Now, back to other things that our emotions point to. They point to our limits. They point to what matters to us. They point to exhaustion, overwhelm, and misalignment. They do not tell us who someone else is. They tell us what's happening inside of us. That shift alone is huge. So now, when I feel annoyed or resentful, I understand it as information. And most of the time, it means one of two things. Either I've allowed something to go on that I don't actually like, or I haven't said no when I needed to. In other words, it's time for a boundary, or it's time to shore up a boundary that already exists, but I haven't been upholding. That's a very different orientation. I'm no longer going outward to figure out what's wrong with someone else. I'm going inward to ask, what do I need here? And that is empowering. It's not corrective. It's not moralizing. It's not about judging or fixing people. It's about self-responsibility and self-care. Once you start understanding emotions this way, you start seeing patterns. Resentment often points to a boundary that's missing or being ignored. Anxiety often points to uncertainty or a lack of self-trust. Not necessarily danger, but uncertainty. Especially uncertainty about whether you'll take care of yourself if something happens. Guilt is another big one. We often feel guilty when we're learning how to self-reference instead of other reference. And one of the biggest insights I've had around guilt actually came from a reel someone shared with me. It landed so deeply that I haven't forgotten. The idea was this: the guilt we feel is proportional to the amount that we abandon ourselves. So let that sink in for a moment. The guilt we feel is proportional to the amount that we abandon ourselves. So if you want to stop feeling guilty, you get to stop abandoning yourself. That doesn't mean being selfish. It doesn't mean being unkind. It means being aligned. The way I teach this to my clients is through values. We identify their top values, and then we practice making decisions and setting boundaries that bring them in alignment with those values. When you act in alignment with your values, even when it's uncomfortable, guilt starts to lose its grip because you're no longer betraying yourself. And then there's numbness. A lot of people worry that numbness means indifference or that something is wrong with them or that they don't care enough. Most of the time, however, numbness actually means overwhelm. It means your system is overloaded and has gone into a kind of shutdown to protect yourself. And again, this is information, not a character flaw. Now, all of this ties directly into why internal safety matters so much when it comes to emotional clarity. You cannot accurately interpret your emotions while scanning the outside world for safety. When you're triggered, your nervous system shifts into survival mode. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, nuance, and perspective, goes offline. The energy that would normally support that kind of thinking is redirected toward fight, flight, or freeze. You can't do both at once. You can't deeply feel what's happening inside you while also scanning the environment for threats. One of those will always win, and it's the scanning for threats part. When your orientation is external, emotions feel chaotic, overwhelming, and confusing. They spike quickly and drop hard. They feel urgent and unmanageable. But when safety is internal, emotions become clearer, and they also become quieter. One of the ways I describe this is that my emotional ups and downs are much fewer and farther between now. And when they do happen, they're nowhere near as high and nowhere near as low as they used to be. Now, that's not because I don't feel. It's because I feel from a grounded place. We cannot securely attach to ourselves if we are constantly oriented outward. Secure attachment to self requires self-referencing. It requires knowing that when something comes up emotionally, we can turn toward ourselves instead of abandoning ourselves or outsourcing our safety by trying to feel safe through other people, places, and things. When that happens, emotions stop being emergencies. They become messages, not messes. We don't need to act on them immediately. We don't need to make them mean something about someone else. We don't need to explain them away or suppress them. We can listen. We can translate what we're hearing. And then we can respond from understanding rather than reaction. That's what emotional boundaries really are. They're not about shutting feelings down. They're not about being stoic or detached. They're about knowing where emotions belong. They belong inside us, guiding us back to ourselves. And that changes everything. If you've ever learned what to say when setting a boundary, but still found yourself caving 5 minutes later, there's a reason for that. Boundaries don't fail because you said it wrong. They fail because your nervous system doesn't feel safe yet. Most people try to set boundaries from guilt, fear, or over-responsibility. Then they wonder why their boundaries collapse the moment someone pushes back. What I teach is how to build internal safety first, so your no doesn't require justification, explaining, or rehearsing speeches in your head at 2 a.m. That's recovery informed. That's how boundaries actually stick. If you're tired of saying yes when you mean no and then beating yourself up for it, I offer a free 30-minute Say No Without Guilt call. No fixing, no pressure, just clarity about what's getting in your way and what could actually help. You can book it through barbchat.net. That's barbchat.net.